So Dmitry Bivol gets his lick back against Artur Beterbiev, and it was a beautifully pure boxing display where he was mentally switched on and ready for every single moment. Bivol, in my opinion, is a very underrated defensive boxer. It's not too often that you'll see him get hit a lot, busted up, or rocked. And the reason why is because he has a very active and disciplined defense. Now, what does active mean? Well, if you look at his defensive look, he operates with a high guard, but he doesn't stay glued to his high guard. A lot of lazy and bad defensive fighters will high guard and high guard only. They won't move or do anything else, they'll just high guard in place. But Bivol high guards and mixes other elements of defense like footwork, head movement, and blocking. He's a Soviet fighter and they're known for their footwork. And Bivol meshes the pendulum bounce with the high guard so well that it's a unique concept and very difficult to pull off. But another important thing was defending on the back foot. This is important because this is the area where he's going to operate in the most, and he has to be sharp because he lost a lot of rounds in the first fight by being physically out-dominated on the back foot. And guess what? He was sharp. One thing that I noticed a lot was his pivots. When your opponent opens up, there's this small window where you can cut an angle and pivot off the ropes. Bivol made sure that that was an emphasis in this fight by not allowing him to be pinned on the ropes, and he was doing a good job resetting the fight back to the center of the ring. That was missing a lot in the first fight. He was also constantly a moving target and never stopped to give his opponent an advantage to open up so easily. You'll see this constant side-to-side movement with Bivol, all while maintaining that active defense that he has. But something that was so impressive to me is not only was he able to defend on the back foot, but y'all know the rules. Gotta complete the job by firing back, and he was initiating some beautiful offense being on the back foot. Earlier we talked about this side-to-side movement, but Bivol extended it by moving, stopping, and then firing his offense to keep Beterbiev honest. Most guys, when they move a lot on their back foot, if they stop to attack, it's usually gonna be 1 or 2 punches. But Bivol was not doing that. He was throwing heat at Beterbiev, straight 3 or 4 punch combos. He was also jabbing on the back foot, which is extremely hard to do. If you've ever trained in this sport before, you'll know how hard it is to move backwards and throw a punch at the same time. And Bivol was executing that to perfection, and once he found the distance with the jab, he was walking Beterbiev into power punches and taking his head off the center line. Another impressive thing about Bivol is that he was never out of position in this fight. Now, what does that mean? Being out of position. Well, earlier we were talking about Bivol being a Soviet fighter and having great footwork, but what does that do? That allows you to maintain distance. Bivol was taking half steps out of range and being in the perfect position to counter. That's what being in position means. If you throw and you step back, but you step back too far and you can't counter, you're out of position. Bivol is probably the best at staying in position. I honestly can't remember an exchange during the fight where he was out of position. This is another reason why he was so good at initiating offense on the back foot. Being able to create enough space to defend and counter, and even if he doesn't land, it allows him to control the fight by giving him options to defend or counter. In times when Beterbiev did try to counter Bivol, Bivol was very good at avoiding the counters. In times when Bivol initiated on the back foot, Beterbiev would look to counter, but Bivol was one step ahead, and this is where the disciplined part of his identity comes into play. There were times when I noticed Bivol would jab, Beterbiev would try to counter with his right hand, but Bivol would bring the jab hand back and block on the same side. If you've ever taken a boxing class in your life, you'll know that coaches scream at you if you don't bring your hand back to your chin after you punch. But it's actually a hard thing to do. Most elite fighters don't do that. But Bivol is different because the time window to pull that off is very small. In other exchanges, he would drop down or step back, and from there he could follow up and look to counter again, or move and reset back to the center. Pretty much it gave him options like I mentioned earlier. Now, I thought Bivol was dominant in this fight. I don't know how the two judges that judged this fight for Bivol scored it 116-112 and 115-113. In my opinion, Beterbiev is lucky to get more than 3 rounds in this fight. But however, there were moments where Bivol did have some lapses similar to the first fight in the 4th and 5th round where he was physically dominated and defensive on the ropes, and Beterbiev pretty much won last time off of pure aggression and ring generalship. If you're looking at it from Bivol's perspective, you gotta look at it like this. Beterbiev is a heavy-handed fighter, so of course exchanging with him would be risky, even though Bivol is down for it. But when you look at both fighters' game plans, Bivol is the one that has to work much harder. He's constantly moving and not being a stationary target, he's got to be sharp with every decision because one mistake could flip the fight against him. And mentally, it is challenging. Imagine fighting a dude who got dynamite in his hands and you got to be careful while also avoiding him on the back foot at all times. That is mentally taxing. So of course he's gonna get a little tired and have mental lapses where he's taking rounds off and not throwing any kind of offense. But he did eventually get over that mental barrier and finish the second half of the fight very strong. Beterbiev tried to cut Bivol off with his punches on the front foot. He would anticipate Bivol trying to exit to his right and try to walk him into a lot of right hands in this fight. The problem is Bivol was defensively sound and kept resetting, so it was hard for Beterbiev to really break Bivol down. However, something Beterbiev did a ton in the first fight and also did in this fight was just mixing power intensity. And if you don't know what that is, it's pretty much just throwing arm punches or punches that are not hard, but they're also not intended to be. The whole point of doing that is to occupy your opponent defensively to set up a power punch behind it. So instead of loading up on every single punch where you're exerting so much energy, you conserve it by throwing a couple of soft ones before firing a hard one. So essentially the rhythm is like touch, 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 and then boom, boom. Two hard ones behind it. That's how Beterbiev was able to pin Bivol into the ropes by forcing Bivol to high guard in a straight line and then throwing power punches. It's definitely a Ukrainian/Russian thing because Lomachenko also does it as well, and it's a very useful offensive tactic to get your offense off. But this is where Beterbiev really failed himself in this fight because his inactive defense didn't do him any favors. Earlier we talked about Bivol's active defense. So if you're thinking about inactive, you can probably get an idea of what that is. But if you can't, pretty much Beterbiev spent way too much time sitting in the pocket with his high guard. He was trying to block everything, but that wasn't working because shots were getting through. He wasn't moving his head, nor was he moving his feet. And Beterbiev can have flat feet where it's glued to the ground. He was just standing tall, hiding behind his guard, trying to absorb punches, and continuing to just follow Bivol around the ring. But something that also failed Beterbiev was his inability to take away Bivol's counterpunching/back foot offense. When you're walking him down and he's trying to lure you into range to eventually try to counter you, you have to be one step ahead. And there's plenty of options. Either follow up, change target, mix up your combos, or even better, counter the counter. Make him walk into your trap by making him think that you walked into his. You can't just play defense and allow those exchanges to become empty, knowing damn well you can't cut him off. Now that we've seen this matchup twice, this matchup is so fascinating, and I'll explain to you guys why. For the majority of both fights, we all know that Beterbiev's been on the front foot being the aggressor. He's the one pressing the issue, but he's not actually as dominant as you think, because Beterbiev can't land in space versus how Bivol can land on him in space. When the fight's in the center, Bivol has the advantage because he's naturally a long-range fighter. The only time when Beterbiev can truly land and get into any kind of an offensive rhythm is if he can pin Bivol on the ropes and let his hands go, all while Bivol is being totally defensive. Other than that, Bivol's the better mid to long-range boxer. So now if you really think about it, Bivol's the one that's actually in control, even though he's spending a majority of the time on the back foot, because he's defensively sound enough to fend off Beterbiev's offense in all areas, minus when he gets pinned on the ropes. And he clearly has the offense on the back foot to work off of his defense. So essentially, if Bivol can avoid any exchange where he's just all defense and no offense, which he was able to do in this fight, then this is his fight to win. And how is that possible, you may ask? Well, it's simple. Bivol is just a better pure boxer. And that's not to say that Beterbiev isn't a smart fighter, because he is. He does blend his intelligence very well with his natural punching power, but Bivol doesn't possess that equalizer. So he has spent every single one of his fights picking his opponent apart through virtually his skills and his skills only. Bivol winning this matchup is more mental more than anything, because he has the skills and the style to outbox a fighter like Beterbiev. It's just whether or not he can minimize those mental lapses where he's allowing the size and strength of Beterbiev to be a factor in the fight. This is exactly why I believe in this matchup, the ball is usually in Bivol's court.